it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel. Broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Hello, welcome to Zombie History, where we explore the buried past. I hope you're ready to unearth some history with us today. Hi, I'm your host, Mzilikazi and I'm here with my co-host, Liz Grumbach. Liz, are you in the house?
Hi, Mzilikazi.
Hello, Liz. It's good to
Hello,
see
and
you.
hello, Pam. Hello, Pam, in the comments. But yeah, it's really good to see you.
Yes.
How's your apocalyptic Monday going?
You know, it's okay. In the apocalypse, we always trying to find some bright spots in the midst of it all. And hey, I got a cup of coffee right here. It's a bright spot.
I got a cup of coffee too. I hope everyone watching has a cup of coffee. That's a bright spot. I like that little pause for coffee. So before we get into the undead stories that we'll be talking about today, we do have a question for the audience, I think.
Yeah.
So for those watching today, we're going to post this in the chat. And it's going to come at you. So while you're watching the episode, we're asking for you to tell us a story in the comments. Do you have a story of a time where you felt policed or liberated in the classroom? And that tells you a little bit about what we're talking about today, right, Ms. Mzilikazi? So that's like a little taste of what we'll be doing.
That's right.
Let us know. We're going to unbury history together today. So let us know in the comments, y'all. But before we turn to comments, I think we're going to chat with a few students today too, Ms. Mzilikazi. What do we mean by policing or carcerality in education, Ms. Mzilikazi?
Okay, awesome question, and I think a really good place for us to ground our conversation today. So when we're thinking about carcerality, we're really thinking about the carceral system. Or what is the carceral system? We might think of the penitentiary, jails, other parts of the system that intersects with our what we call the justice system here. And in particular, we're thinking about some of the effects of the justice system. For example, the large prison population we have within the United States, right? Remember, it's the largest prison population in the developed modern world, right? So when we're thinking about carcerality as it relates to education, we're thinking about the ways in which policing of some kind takes place within the classroom or within schools. Right, so that might actually be the presence of police to systems in the classroom that are really about students adhering and following rather than, say, like inventing or creating something new.
That's amazing. I love the kind of dichotomy between like inventing and exploration, and then kind of what we mean by carcerality as these things are in this definition, right? Predictive policing, disciplinary processes, and punishment, all of which can be happening in the classroom. So now, Ms. Mzilikazi, I think we wanted to just get the rant out right now, right? Because I think both of us have this rant, and we need to vent about the ways in which we see carcerality being enacted in education. And I know that you have an example that you wanted to start with.
Absolutely. Well, let's just start with cops in the classroom or cops in schools, AKA also known as resource officers, right? And we have bear witness, at least for those instances that become, public and popular, about abusive power towards students, right? We're talking about we can go young, right? Whether it be a 6-year-old in Florida who was handcuffed and put in the back of a police car for having a tantrum, right? Or we could go older, right? Maybe 14-year-old who's thrown to the floor by a resource officer inside of her classroom, right? So the sheer presence and the questions that come up with cops and resource officers in schools is, do they make students safer? Right. I mean, that's not even to mention thinking about school violence and safety and gun violence and school shootings. Just the presence of officers, does it make students safer? And we have to ask those questions. And at a minimum start, we can see that there's a connection between policing outside of the school and policing within the school. Now, some of you may have heard of some of these things before. Maybe you've heard of the school to prison pipeline. right, that highlights some of these ways in which we police students, um, put them in detention, right? Kick them out of school, right? These systems that we have in place that kind of pave the way for a life connected to the carceral system. Okay.
And I love this comment. So I think we brought this comment up earlier, but this comment from Jasmine Lee, which is very much connected to what you were just saying, Mzilikazi, right? I also think it's telling that carceral action and policing applies to both prisons and schools. That is
Absolutely.
very telling, and it's very telling of how we. Yeah, thank you, Jizzy. How we do things in the U.S.
That's right. That's
I
right.
want to kind of vent about something that I see in the classroom and the educational system that I think has a tinge maybe of carcerality in it. And that is the kind of tech that we use in schools because we are
Mm,
so scared of plagiarism that we would rather track our students' bodies and maybe even invade their privacy in their homes with that technology. And I think we have an example here of some of this. So these are some of the settings from Proctorio, which some of y'all may have heard of, some of y'all may not have heard of. So Proctorio is this online, it's third party, it's not connected to a university, it's a company that is a proctoring service for exams online. It's used a lot in large online classes, and it connects with Canvas, with Blackboard, with all of those things that we're used to seeing kind of in both sometimes K through 12, but mostly college education.
mhm,
There have been so many issues with this technology and technologies like it. And what you're seeing right now are the settings that your professor can make to detect these things as you're taking the test. So if you're taking a test on a computer or even a phone, which sometimes it has its own issues, right here it says, I'll direct you to the head and eye movement. So it is checking where your eyes and your head are facing. It's checking if you have multiple faces at once. So if you have someone passing behind you, if you have to leave the room, the settings are low right here, but you can imagine a professor that has it very high. If you have to leave the room because you have maybe a crying baby, or you have to answer the door because you're the only one home, etc. It detects things like that. And in my opinion, I think that that is invading the privacy of students. There are several other things that technologies like this have revealed. So, our tech isn't perfect. And tech like this in 2021, it was revealed, for instance, that Black faces were not detected as head and eyes because, of course, most of this technology, facial recognition technology, is not trained on people of color, on faces of color. So the Proctorio was reporting that those Black students were cheating, were cheating on their exams when they weren't. They just weren't being detected. Their faces weren't being detected. But I also, think about the ways in which this might be inaccessible for neurodivergent students, might be incredibly inaccessible for those with anxiety, in which something like this would just worsen their anxiety. And I know we have a couple of comments coming in, right? So very icky from Pamela. I agree, Pam. And then, from Dave, thank you so much. Instead of Terminators, we have robots quietly watching us. I could rant about that forever. The robots are watching us. And I think, we have Nicole, absolutely. Neurodivergent students, ADHD and anxiety, you can imagine. And some of y'all out there might know how it feels like to be surveilled in this way when you're trying to focus really hard on taking a test. And then, of course, Dave, it might be stressful for anyone, for everyone. Absolutely agree. And then I just wanted to bring this in too. I heard that there were a few schools that didn't really vet the proctoring service they used during COVID. And Drizzy, yes, that's true. And anyone that is interested in kind of knowing the history of these proctoring or technologies that we use in the classroom, I really urge you to seek out information about it, especially if you think that it's going to affect you you, your grades, the way you move through your educational experience. So I'll end there. And I ranted for so long, Mzilikazi. I could talk about this forever.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important one, and we're talking about the presence of, somebody, something,
Exactly.
technology watching you in your home, and uh,
Mhm.
does that help students do better? Does that help them to, right?
Yeah. What? Yeah, exactly. Why are we doing this? Are we doing it for the students, or are we doing it for ourselves? Are we doing it for the institution that wants to kind of be partnered with a tech company, right? Et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
Tons. And let me
Yeah,
add to that because I can already
please.
feel I want to I want to just go further. But some other
Yeah.
ways in which policies can be um,
Mhm.
carceral in nature and policing in nature. Really thinking about tardies.
Yeah.
You're thinking about absences and whether or not absences are counted, or are you in a school where you get like awarded for 100% attendance, but life is not 100% attendance, right? It's a little bit more complex than that. And what does that do when you're training young kids to be like they have to be perfect?
Mhm.
um, Grade norming, um, just the different ways that we push students to conform, and that they're being socialized to conform in our classrooms, right? I mean, by you must arrive at a certain period of time, you got to sit still, right? You got to look a certain way. I mean to say, like, you're face forward in the classroom, right? I mean, the norms of trying to fit into the class that can be, as Dave noted earlier, it can be challenging for everybody, right? It can be challenging for neurodiverse students, and it can be challenging for everyone to try to fit into that not only that mold, but what happens when you don't, right? Right. Like
Mhm.
if you need a note, does your kid need a note if they're a few minutes late for school? Or I've heard of some college classes. So if you are a minute late, the professor will not let you into class, right? And
Mhm.
okay, well, what does that do for a student who's made it all the way to campus but is a few minutes late to the classroom, right? So
Mhm.
I kind of get conceptually that folks want, I don't know, they want things to be done in a certain way in their classroom, and they imagine that that is training them in a good way. But I can see some of these negative effects of that kind of training, right? Um,
Yeah.
and does it help students learn?
Yeah, it does help students learn. And like I brought this comment up from Jasmine, not only does this create a school to prison pipeline in a sense, but it's beating the creativity and critical thought out of our educational experiences. And that's
That's
exactly
right.
right, Jasmine, that this sounds like, right, that they're training kids, us, anyone that's going through an educational system like this in a certain way so that they have more workers,
That's right.
right? And then Pam producing little soldiers.
That's right.
I think
Who
we
can
have a comment here
follow?
from Nicole who can follow. It's about
Mhm.
following. It's about, I mean, I think that you mentioned this, Ms. Elkazi, but like norms are not useful because we're not exactly sure what the norm is, and there is no norm. Is there a norm? What do you
Mhm.
think?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, norming to whom, right? Norming to the student who's had access to, extra tutoring, or
Mhm.
who's got access. Is I mean, that student might set the curve, right? But is that student the norm, right?
Yes. Oh,
So
that's so good. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I just really resonating on the comment about how it's socializing folks to follow and to be workers, right? And that
Mhm.
um is great for one kind of system, but it's not really great for a system that is in dire need of people to be active, creative, critical thinkers, right? I mean, the world's solutions don't get dealt with by, millions of folks who can follow. But when their creativity is nurtured, right, then we see solutions to some of these huge issues, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So I have a question for you though, Ms. Olakazi, and this is
Yes.
from an educator's point of view, right? And this is, just so everyone knows, this is a sarcastic question. Ms. Olakazi, what if people cheat, right? What do we
Yeah.
do?
There's a lot of concern about cheating, and well, we could talk so much about this. I mean, real concerns. Uh, But I think you've got to find one, as an educator, has to find the sweet spot between the concern about cheating and space for folks to just be, right? I mean, like, folks are going to do what they're going to do,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do. Is it I don't know, is it my job to stop them from cheating if they're going to cheat? I mean, there are folks who are going to use the policies that I have set up in my class to allow them the space for deeper understanding of the material, right? So that maybe they don't feel like they have to cheat. I would hope, if I can set up
Mhm.
some policies that are not going to, back them into a corner where they think that's the only option to pass my class is through cheating, right? I mean,
Mhm.
alternatively, rather than timing them or giving them an hour to complete an exam, I will make a test untimed and open book. I
Beautiful.
right? I mean, not
Beautiful.
everybody's not everybody's going to be able to do something in 50 minutes or an hour, and people have lives that
Yeah.
extend beyond the classroom, and recognizing that maybe you've got 30 minutes here, but then you got to cook dinner, or you got kids to watch, or you got something else that's popped up. You need to be able to return back to your studies at a time when it's convenient for you as a student.
Yeah. Yeah. And that returns to a, what is testing? What are we testing for? Right. We're testing for, the retention of knowledge in some ways, right? Especially, I mean, we both kind of teach like social science and humanities, right?
That's right.
But in some ways, we are testing for knowledge, and those that are in the hard sciences are testing for the retention of that knowledge that they can use it in their future careers. Absolutely, but at the same time, most of us, adult self us, we all Google the answers.
Mm,
That's our society now. And before we had Google, we all encyclopedia the answers, right?
that's right.
We always have textbooks and books at hand in the real world. So why would we not allow something like that for testing? I don't know about you, but at a certain point in my testing, I was allowed to bring an index card and I could put as
Hmm.
much information on the index card as possible. And I've
Yeah.
carried that kind of mentality through me as I've become an educator. Shout out to Miss Peters in my junior high school English class for that. And I think that we have a lot of comments coming in right now. One of the things that we have been talking about, right, is exam oriented education, and how I don't think either of us necessarily think that strict exam oriented education is the answer.
Hmm.
That to me sounds a little bit another tinge of carcerality. Does
Mm.
that sound right, Ms. Lakazi?
Yeah, I mean, it's carcerality, conformity, a certain way of doing of assessing learning, when there are all kinds of ways of assessing learning. But um, I get the challenge for educators, right? I mean, especially considering how many students one might have, as about whether or not you can effectively provide um, ex- like not just
Mhm.
exams but assignments, for example, that will allow the
Yes.
space for students to be creative thinkers, rather than just testing them on like multiple choice, right? And so I try to do a combination of this, right, recognizing that the sheer quantity of students will not allow me to do a creative project for every assignment. I just don't have the time in terms of grading, but I have moved towards a final assignment that is um, really about independence and them choosing the learning that they want to have access to and pursuing that, right? It allows them the freedom to
Mhm.
pursue what it is that they want to learn. Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely, Jasmine. It is, again, we get to this question about what is serving learning here,
Yeah.
right? What does it serve learning? And some of this stuff is going to depend on the field. I would, right? I mean, I think when we're in
Absolutely.
social science and humanities, you've got the space often to have some flexibility in how you
Mhm.
ask students about the
Mhm.
material and how they kind of get it back to you.
Yeah. And I think that that's exactly it, is that we are seeking ways of measuring growth, just like Crystal has here, right? That aren't necessarily based on numbers, right? Number grades all the time. Sometimes you have to do multiple choice as an educator. You just have to, right? And that's a number grade. But I've been experimenting with things like, if I go into a classroom, I want to create the syllabus with you. I want to know what you want to learn. I want to know how you want to grow. And then we put metrics in place together. And that's a kind of solidarity with student and teacher that I've been experimenting with in the classroom that I think has been incredibly helpful. We have so many comments coming in, and thank you so much for commenting. But I think now, Mzilikazi, we might have some guests to bring on.
Yes, let's ask them. Please.
Right,
Yeah,
cool.
we'd love to hear from other folks.
I think we have some students joining us, and this is Crystal and Sean. Hello. Hi. Thank you for joining us. And then we have some students in the background as well. Hello, students. Wonderful. Oh, thank you for waving. So Crystal and Sean, we have a question for you. And that question is, do you have a story of a time where you felt policed or liberated in the classroom? And whoever wants to start, please go.
So, and it's never actually happened to me, I was always worried about if I get into a fight, especially in early, middle, and high schools, that I would get in trouble for defending myself, like a physical fight, and to a lesser extent, even here in college, because there are having quite a few cases where both people are disciplined, despite the fact that they instigated it. What are you supposed to do? Just let yourself get beat up or be extremely defensive? That isn't really too practical.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that there's something about the policing of physical bodies in our K through 12 education, in our educational system, period, right? That, thank you so much, Sean. And I know, Crystal, did you have a story to tell?
I mean, throughout middle school, I was constantly dress coded, even if I was wearing something similar to another girl. I think they definitely police body type, because usually I'm a larger girl compared to other people, and I would notice that I would get dress coded more than some of the smaller size girls. And I definitely think that type of punishment system based off body type definitely is a form of discrimination in the schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Thinking through the policing of gender, policing of sex, this kind of push to conformity, right, within that space of there are certain rules, and of course, who gets policed based on whose bodies are noticed and wearing what. So that's a really very poignant example right there.
Yeah, thank you. And we have some comments that were coming in that I just have to read for the students joining us. So dress coding, especially for girls, was so gross, especially when you consider the reasoning, right? And that's something that you brought up for us, Crystal. Thank you. And then I think, there's this comment from Drizzy that really relates to what Sean was going through. Definitely worried about defending yourself. Their school had a no tolerance policy, and I'm not sure, Sean, if that was similar to what you went through as well.
I didn't really pay attention to that, to be honest. I had more things to worry about.
Yeah.
Sure, but it does get to the question of safety, right? And between students, right? And of course, what's happening in our politics right now, I mean, is the discussion of safety at schools, right? What is going to keep students safe, right? Whether it be students from one another, if there's physical violence, questions of guns being brought to school and school shootings. I mean, this is the question of our times, I would say. How do we keep students safe, especially in a place where they're supposed to be safe, right? We're watching this, and we're watching this politics play out across the country, where some folks would rather protect guns than change policies and protect students and folks. So timely, it's political.
It's timely, it's political. And I think, as an educator, I think that I want students to feel as safe as possible in my classroom. And I have been reminded of the importance of that by Sean and Crystal. So thank you both so much. I'm wondering, so one of the things that we didn't define yet, Mzilikazi, was liberatory education. And I'm going to bring up a definition of that right now, I believe, so that we can talk about it a little bit. And then maybe Sean and Crystal can tell us if they have ever felt like they had a liberatory moment in the classroom. So I'm going to bring this up really quick. And then Ms. Lakazi, maybe you can introduce it for us.
Sure. I mean, let's think about liberatory education. I mean, liberatory as in liberation having to do with freedom, right? So this is in juxtaposition to a style of teaching that's about your conforming, right? That you're following. And leads the way for a style of teaching where it's based in your co-creation in the classroom. Like to Liz's early example, maybe you work with your professor to create the syllabus, right? Or your freedom to choose your final project or choose what it is that you research. So you already take something that is of interest to yourself and you have the space to acquire deeper learning and deeper meaning. I would say in general, liberatory education is about teaching from a perspective of love and community, right? And thinking that right. And people always say that the children and the youth are our future. So why not provide them the space for creative thinking, for the really tough problems we have, so we can have creative solutions rather than just teaching students to conform and follow and sit in their seats. Let's think about how students can be independent and free thinkers and write and, create something completely new that we've never thought about. But that comes from providing them the space to be independent thinkers.
I love that. And I know that we have a quote from Bell Hooks as well. So I just wanted to highlight this. So one of the ways in which we do things like that is we create learning communities together. And there are a lot of ways to do that. But if a student feels like, and a teacher or professor also feels like they are part of a learning community together, then that is what makes learning meaningful and useful. So not only are they in that learning community together, but they are co-creating. They are both responsible for creating. And it's that action of co-creation of a space in which we're all learning together that I think is part of that journey. Ms. Lakazi, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can think about liberation also in the policies that you uphold in the classroom, right? The students running late or a student's late with an assignment, but they still want to be engaged and they still want to do the work, then how do we create the spaces for them to participate rather than be punitive? No, you missed the deadline. No, you get nothing. No, you can't participate. No, you're 2 minutes late. No, you can't come in, as opposed to, sure, I recognize you've got complex things going on in your life, and I'm really glad that you made it today. Come on in. Mm-hmm. Right? Real different approaches.
So, Sean and Crystal, have y'all ever had a moment where you have felt like you were part of a learning community? And we don't even have to, liberatory education, but also part of a learning community in a way. We'd love to hear from you, either of you.
I had an elective in middle school, and it was kind of like a unstructured study group type thing. It was called AVID. It was like a college prep class. And so we would come to the class and we would have like 3 or 4 designated student tutors, and they would all be in different subjects. Like you'd have a math tutor, an English tutor, all that. And so we would come to the class and be like, okay, this is what we're struggling with today. And so then we would just do a review session. And I know that was in middle school, so I don't know how effective that would be now that everyone's taking different courses. But I remember I looked forward to that class because I kind of got to choose what I needed help with, and that would be what we focused on that day. And I always thought it was cool. And then it also gave me a chance to feel empowered because I got to teach what I knew. And so it kind of solidified that I knew the concepts, and it was just a really cool experience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I was smiling big the whole time that you were talking about that.
And that's the thing, though, when you have an experience of liberation in the classroom, you don't forget it. So that you remembered something from middle school, I think is really powerful. I think back to one class in college. All right. Shout out to Dr. Audrey McCluskey, who allowed me the space to do an independent project. I made a video for my final project in class, which, let me tell you, took me way longer than the paper other the other option that I could have done. But I never forgot it. I never forgot it.
Mhm.
And that's what liberatory education does. It allows you the space to be a creative, independent, free thinker, and you never forget the time that you had it.
Mhm. We had a comment that was very similar. So Jasmine said, one teacher in high school that made me feel like a real person. And that teacher heavily influenced Jasmine's choice of major in college. And I think maybe, you know, some of us, if we're lucky, maybe privileged, right, have had that teacher, that one teacher. I know I did. And that's why I went on my educational journey. Would like to open it up again. So I'm not sure, Sean, if you wanted to talk about a liberatory or learning community experience.
So in my elementary organic chemistry class in community college, while it was very exam based and all that, we did have a rather significant portion, arguably maybe 15-20% based on a research paper of or a topic that applied to organic chemistry, which, like, assuming class content is a lot of molecules. One person chose methamphetamine, one person chose vitamin A, I chose antibiotic tetracyclines.
Cool. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's great. Right. And because sometimes exams, I mean, a professor who focuses on exams, that doesn't mean that they don't have the options in their classroom to also create spaces of liberation through that example. Right. I mean, folks are curious about things. I'm sure, you know, having the option to study methamphetamine and what it is probably engage some students, right? And the antibiotic that you chose, right? That the freedom to direct some of your education sounds like what was really important there.
Mhm. And that was, I would love to keep chatting with y'all, but I think that we are out of time today. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank Crystal, thank Sean, thank the whole class for joining us today. I love hearing student voices. And so it felt like a kind of privilege for me to talk to y'all today. Thank you.
Thank you for letting us be here.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for being our guests on Zombie History. So we have so many great comments. So I would encourage anyone that is watching this show after the live stream to check out the running chat, because we have so many amazing, amazing answers to this question of, have you ever experienced policing or liberation in the classroom? And with that, I think that I will say, Mzilikazi, thank you. Thank you always for sharing the space with me.
Oh, Liz, thank you. You know how I feel about you. It's always such a pleasure to be with you all the time, and especially together on Zombie History. Yes.
Absolutely, especially together. Thank you.
And I thank you. And folks, remember, we still got a few shows left of the season. So please be sure to tune in next week for Apocalypse Cafe Open Mic. Hit the subscribe button, the like button, all the buttons. And be sure to follow us on social media so you can be tuned in and hit to the new shows for this season. So you'll know live and direct what's coming up. Okay. And yeah, let me just say, I appreciate you all joining us. As always, we thank you for being here. We will see you next time. And till then, hey, don't be a zombie. Know your history. Take care.
And if the whole world says that we're